but I'll pull it right up afterwards.
Cool.
And just pull it off and edit it. Thank you so much, Janadu. How's life, man?
Good. It's busy.
Yeah. Well, I don't want you to be able to see me. How was Germany?
It was very German. No, it was good. I was in Nuremberg, which is not a very big city, but it was cool. It was fun.
It looked fun.
Yeah. A lot of very, very heavy foods, a lot of very long meetings and accents I didn't really understand. So, about the norm.
Did you get any good swag?
Yeah. We get some nice stuff. I'm not gonna lie. It's not bad. I have a lot of shoes.
I'm sure that's terrible for you.
Yeah, it's really awful.
And how's New York City?
It's good. I like it a lot. Yeah, I mean, this agency I work at now, I work down in the financial district, and you know the bowl, the statue of the bowl.
Yeah.
So my office is right out, that's outside my office.
Cool.
So, I'm in the heart of it downtown, which is cool. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's good. Agency life suits me.
Good for you. I'm so glad.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking time today to chat.
Yeah, no problem.
Help me with this little grad school project. When they announced it that it was like a literature review paper and a group project and a video, everyone in the class was like, how do we do that? What do we do? And the girl who was like, we'd already decided to be in a group together, and I turned to her and I was like, I used to make videos in college.
Don't tell everyone else though.
No, because it's not going to be, I mean, it'll be fine. It won't be my perfectionist quality, but what are you going to do with when you have 3,000 other things to do? So it'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll work out.
But the class is called Critical Issues in Higher Education.
Okay.
So we've covered a lot this semester. And the end project, we actually had to pick a topic that we weren't going to be covering. So we did a lot of like mental health, diversity issues, big time sports in college, campuses, things like that. But the topic we pitched and got approved was student advocacy and how social media has impacted that. Okay. So there's a historical element that one of the girls was looking into as far as, in the 50s and 60s when there were protests, how did students get their message out? What was that like? And looking over the past 8 months, how much has happened on college campuses and how quickly things, spread and changed, and kind of looking at how does social media help students?
Yeah.
How does it impact the message, like the strength of the message, or distort the message? And then how college campuses are using it, either in a positive or negative way. So obviously when there's a snow day or there's a crisis on campus, they can easily share information.
Right.
But in some ways, their lack of response or how they respond to some issues on social media can also not be a good thing. So,
not great.
No. So we've talked to a lot of students, some professors at Emerson College, talked to someone from a PR agency yesterday. But I wanted to get your thoughts as someone who worked in social media at a college campus.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of someone who grew up through all of these changes, and how social media is, in your view, has kind of grown and shifted and changed over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. Cool.
So I have some questions, but also you're free just to kind of go where you'd like.
Okay.
But just starting off by introducing yourself, who you are and what you do would be great.
So my name is Rob Engelsman. I am a integrated strategist at an agency here in New York called the 88. We're a digital advertising agency. I lead global social media strategy for Adidas Originals, which is an audience of about 40-ish million on social across the board, and also work with clients like Men's Warehouse, Zico Coconut Water, a lot of different clients to help them and their brands with their social and digital strategy. Prior to that, I worked at Droga5, which is a large ad agency here in New York, on clients like Smartwater, Honey Made Graham Crackers, and Belvita, the breakfast biscuits, not the cheese. And I've also done work with TD Ameritrade, the Olympics, Dick's Sporting Goods, and a variety of other clients across the board. So I have a lot of experience in social strategy, and in higher ed, and also in general brand advertising world as well.
So a pretty sweet resume you've got there, and
not bad, right?
Just a few years, my friends. So in your experience, what would you say you've seen as how colleges have adopted social media strategy, or what kind of has been your view on that?
Yeah, so I actually started running Ithaca College's social media when I was a senior. So that was the fall of 2010, I believe. And so at that point, Twitter was still fairly new. Facebook had only been open to people that weren't in college for about 3.5 years. Instagram didn't exist. So it was a very different landscape. A lot of people were playing in the space, but it hadn't really formalized itself. It was kind of a lot of people, it was kind of like the Wild West of communicating. And so in the 2.5, 3 years that I ran social for Ithaca, there was really a massive evolution in the seriousness with which people took social, and a beginning of recognition of the power that it could hold, both in a positive and a negative sense, I think. By the time I left, we had a large audience on Twitter, a large audience on Facebook, and also on Instagram as well. Instagram had launched, and we'd launched there. And so, I think what happened was as more platforms launched, people had to think more critically about what the best things to do on each were. And also as more platforms launched, people could be more selective about where they wanted to be. So a lot of the reason why certain people are on certain platforms and not others, it's very self-selective. Younger people use Snapchat. That they think that's the best way for them to communicate. Statistically, older people are on Twitter. But then within that, there's even more designations. But basically what's happened is the proliferation of social over the last 5 to 6 years has basically made it so that you can choose to be somewhere. And basically you've self-selected where you're getting information from and who you talk to because of where you're choosing to go. So where it was once you were on MySpace or Friendster, or you had a Zanga journal, now there's like 80,000 different things you can do. And so that becomes a problem when you're trying to communicate one singular message, because it's putting you in a lot of different places that have a lot of different mechanisms for how they work, but you're still trying to say the same thing. So as a person, you don't think about that very much because you're just doing your thing. But as a brand, as a university, you have to very heavily consider what you're saying and where you're saying it, because the audience changes depending on where you're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So while I was at Ithaca, that maturation started to happen a lot. And the conversation started to be less about, this social thing that's over here in the corner, and more about how we can integrate it into the general ethos and communication arm. In my experience, a lot of social media departments in higher ed have been built out of the PR departments, which I think makes an easy, natural connection for higher ed. I don't think it works as well outside of higher ed, but in higher ed, where the message is very important, I think, and also it's become kind of the new PR in a sense, is what social has become. So it's a good way to marry those things together and build them out of those kind of offices. So I don't know if that answered.
Nope, you did great. That was great.
Okay.
So the big thing with social media is that it's two-way communication. So a lot of times people are putting things out there because they want them to interact with it.
Right.
Not all the time, but that's what social media really is for. And so we're seeing students put a lot of things out there that they're expecting colleges to respond to.
Right.
In a positive and negative way. Mm-hmm. So with that kind of two-way communication, what responsibility do you feel like, in your experience, do you feel like institutions have, if they're going to be engaging in social media, they have to address? How would you advise, I guess, a university or college about two-way communication, especially around a lot of the things we saw this last fall with protests and student advocacy?
Yeah, so I think some of it comes back to what I was just saying about choosing where you're active. If you're active in a place, you're basically saying that we're here so you can come talk to us, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a danger to being overactive across too many different things, because then you can't do them well and you also can't respond as well, right? So the flip side of that is, if you're not active in a space that people can easily comment on or talk about you anyway, then you can't respond easily if there is something wrong. or if there is a question that needs to be answered. I can give you a couple examples. One would be Tumblr. When I worked at Ithaca, you can search Tumblr by hashtags, and people tag posts. And what I found was that Tumblr's very big mid-teenager community. And so people were asking questions in meeting, prospective students were meeting current students on Tumblr through these tags and asking questions that maybe the current students weren't the best person to answer, but that's who was there. And so we pushed to launch, and we did launch a Tumblr, basically specifically because we knew people were asking questions there, and we needed to be basically facilitate the spread of more factual or correct information. I think it's also, my second example would basically be that there's an ebb and a flow, and depending on the situation, you have to set expectations. So if there's something happening that's really important or a big deal, then you should expect that you're going to need to be more active in the space to answer those questions. But if there's something that's not as important, you don't have to answer immediately, because then you're just setting an expectation that that's always how you're going to be. So I was running Ithaca's social when Hurricane Sandy hit. And Sandy was obviously terrible in New York City, but it had a pretty bad effect in terms of winds, mostly wind, and then rain was pretty bad for a little bit in upstate New York. And so there were people, the college was updating its website every couple hours, but people wanted more frequent information. And so they were turning to social, particularly Twitter, to ask the college, what's going on here, or people were also using it to report, like a limb just fell in this part of campus, like, can someone come clean it up? And so in that sense, we knew ahead of time that, the traditional source of information wasn't going to be the only way that worked. So we collaborated to make sure that everyone knew where to go and who to talk to. And I was able to feed the information from social back to other people very easily. But there is, if we hadn't have been there, there would have been a lot of misinformation. Like, people were saying, oh, I hear that Cornell is closed and things like that, which was just not true. And so we were able to combat that with actual factual information from a trusted source, which was the college. In other instances, that could have led to people skipping class because they thought the college was closed because they heard so on Twitter. So those are pretty basic examples of when to be active. I think it is really important to understand it as an ebb and flow, and understand that you can't always be 100% there. Setting expectations is important. There are some airlines that do a lot of customer service on social, and they set some really good expectations. They'll literally say, like, we will get back to you in the next 45 minutes. And then when that time changes, they'll update it. And sometimes it's like, we'll get back to you in the next 15 minutes. And so setting those sorts of expectations up front makes for a much better experience the whole way through, for sure. But it is a dangerous place because information that's incorrect can spread very quickly if you don't handle it the right way.
Those are good examples. Thank you. So for, having seen kind of grown up in the change of, like, Facebook and Twitter, how have you and your, both being a student and working in higher ed afterwards for a little bit, seen student advocacy or student engagement on campus change, as social media became a bigger part of just what students' everyday lives are?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's difficult to say when the moment that it really happened was, but basically all of a sudden the communications that would have been pinned to a board on campus about what was going on was now a litany of Facebook events you were being invited to. And that transition, I think, happened a lot faster than anyone could have anticipated in and outside of higher ed. But the problem for higher ed is that higher ed moves at a very slow pace. Higher ed thinks very cyclically in terms of, you have a prospective student who is in your cycle for a couple of years as a prospective student. Then you have a student who's in your cycle for 4 to 6 years, depending on what they're studying. Then you have an alum, and there's only 2 types of alum. There's young alum who graduated in the last 10 years, and then there's just older alum. And so college only thinks in these very large chunks of time, and the internet doesn't wait for that. And so the old way where you'd change a marketing campaign or you'd change the way that you ran an event but you'd change it for next year. Like now, the expectation is you change it now, and that the change happens immediately. And so you have this interesting thing happening where those two ideals are butting up against each other. And so a good example would be the protests that happened at Ithaca College last year, where you had a group of students that basically set a line in the sand and said things have to change now, which was a bit naive because of the fact that they didn't take the time to understand the process involved in making things change. And they had a higher ed organization on the other side that was trying to educate that, like, we want to make this change, but it takes time. But they didn't necessarily do it the right way or go about it in a very good way. I think they kind of muddied their messaging too much by trying to explain the process that it would take. And so when those two things start to butt heads, that's when it starts to get difficult, I think. And the crazy thing at the end of the day about all of this is that it's moving so fast and it's changing so fast, then there's no right answer. There's no playbook, because everything's iterating and everything's evolving. So it's not like a math equation. Like an old school way for a college to communicate would be a press release, and you had a template, and you had the pull quote you'd put in it, and you had XYZ, and you'd send it out. Or the templated way that used to be local newscasts or national newscasts. Like you have your segments, you have your packages, you know exactly how it goes. You're just plugging and playing. Well, plug and play doesn't work online because of the way that the things are changing, and because of the fact that you can't guarantee who your audience is, or if you're talking to the right audience, or if they're even reading your message, if they follow you. There's just too many variables now. So higher ed's had to figure out how to adjust to that, and I think some people have definitely done it better than others, but it comes back to that. It's the difference in time. It's the internet thinks in milliseconds and moments, and then higher ed thinks in yearly and 4-yearly and like 10-year cycles. So it's a very interesting place to be, to see those things kind of butting heads quite frequently now, especially with the protests and things going on.
Yeah, the PR guy we talked to yesterday said something very similar. It's in the way the higher ed thinks, and the people you have making a lot of those decisions didn't grow up with this, And one of the students we talked to was like, she's like, I've had a cell phone for as long as I can remember. Like, social media is my life, like that's.
Yeah, and that's important to remember too, that like, sure, younger people have all this tech that they didn't have before, but tech has never evolved at such a rate where there's never been so many like micro segments of generations before. We're a couple years apart, and we've completely different experiences with some social platforms because of where they were in their evolution when we were at certain periods in our lives. And those like micro segments make it even harder to say the right thing for everybody, because the internet's become such a cynical place and such a critical place. So it's very difficult to be smart across the board. You're never going to make everybody happy, and higher ed wants everybody to be happy. So they have a big problem with that generally.
What advice would you give to students who are looking to kind of, get a message out there, rally people behind them? For example, all the protests we have seen over the last 8 months, you've seen some things done really well and some things not, but what, and also we play with this idea of like, once you put it out there, it's out there forever.
Right.
So kind of, both on the higher ed side and the student side, what kind of advice would you give to each party as far as, if you have a message you want to be heard, what is, in your experience, a good way to do that?
So I think my best advice for the student side of things is that if you're going to use social media to grow a voice in advocacy, you have to be malleable toward how you treat the issue you're talking about. So a lot of the student groups that across the country that were bringing these things to the table over the last year or so, they did so in a way that still was very rigid, which was kind of what they were fighting against. It's hard for you to say, I don't like the way that you're so staunch in this, so here are my 8 staunch things that I'm not going to budge on. And the beauty of the internet is, yes, nothing disappears and everything's here forever, except Snapchat, but still sort of Snapchat, depends. But the beauty is that the idea is that you can learn and evolve with it, and your opinions can evolve with it over time. And I mean, I'm sure like if you search through like your Facebook posts about like New England sports teams, your opinions on different teams would change and evolve, or certain players would change and evolve. Like you just have to be malleable and allow yourself to not be stuck in the sand on one thing. The problem is a lot of people use social now as a gotcha thing. So they'll call people out and be like, well, you said this once 6 years ago at like 4 a.m. and whatever. And so we just have to be more accepting of that people's attitudes can change and they can evolve. And like maybe what we're pushing for changes a little bit. And maybe what we're fighting for, we learn from and we move in a different way. I think another piece of advice would be, so social is really cool because you can kind of have these leaderless movements, if you will. But the other struggle is that, sorry, one sec. What's up? 2:30? Okay, cool. I'll be on in a sec. Yeah. I'm just gonna have to move in a sec.
Oh, no. That was my last question, so you're good.
So I think one piece would be, just because social allows you to have this kind of leaderless structure doesn't mean that you have to keep it that way. I think at the end of the day, you do need to find a voice that kind of brings everything together and helps you push your agenda. And so the problem that happens a lot is people are like, oh, like we don't have a leader and we're just going to talk about this on a hashtag on Twitter. But like a hashtag is not a strategy. You need people that actually come together in real life and figure out the best way to push your message long term. Because just having a hashtag trend for a day, like no board of trustees at a college is going to give a shit about that. That's just not something that they care about. They see the long view, and you may feel like you've made an impact momentarily, but it doesn't mean you're going to make one forever. I'd say from the university side, it's really important to be smart about where you're active and know what people are talking about, what people are listening for. You can easily search, based on location or based on what people are saying, like what's going on, what's the general vibe, what are people talking about, what's the mood like. And so, whereas it used to be the students were kind of low on the totem pole in terms of who was important and the message they were putting out, now the thing is that you actually have a flip side where the students, because they get social more, have more power than everybody else does. Like then the alumni, then the board of trustees who don't understand the internet and all that sort of thing. So it's sort of been this power shift, and the colleges have to learn how to recognize that.
Indeed. I know you're losing your room.
Yeah, I'm just moving. Sorry guys. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that's generally, it's difficult, right? Because everything changes so fast. So you're not going to be able to write. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to write like, here's exactly what the best way to handle this from either side is. I think open dialogue is really important. Testing your message is more important than ever before. You have to embrace it. You can't fight it. Is basically what I'm saying. You have to, if you're going to get into social and you're going to be active in it, you have to embrace it for better or for worse and be a partner and be part of a community, or else you're just treating it like you were treating old media where it's a one-way spew of stuff. So you have to be engaged in the community to earn the respect of the community, and also to hopefully deal with situations that are negative in a more positive way.
That was perfect.
So this angle is really attractive.
It's just the people in my grad school class seeing this. It's fine. That was great. The community piece was really awesome, and you've given me a lot of great stuff to work with. I really appreciate it.
Cool.
It was nice to see you, even if it was grad school stuff.
How does this, like, what's your final product look like for this? Is it like a 80-page paper, or?
It is a 15-minute video and 10-page paper.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's not that bad. You've edited longer.
I have, but not in a while.
It'll be fine.
We have a lot of content, and a lot of it's pieced together, so it'll be a lot of hours. It's due on Wednesday, so here we go.
Busy weekend, though.
Yeah. I love it. Grad school's great, but doing it while working is...
Yeah, how are you balancing that? Are you like at work right now, or are you working a couple days a week? Okay.
No, I work full time.
Okay.
And my classes I'm taking two, this semester they're on the same night, so I go from 4:30 to 10 p.m. on Wednesdays in class.
Woof.
And it's a lot of reading and papers.
Yeah.
And working full time, which is great.
It's tricky.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I mean, I've no thought against you.
I lost you.
Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Yeah, I totally lost you.
But yeah, I'd love to see whatever the final product is.
Well, thank you. If it's watchable, I'll send it to you otherwise.
Fair enough. Fair enough. No, this kind of stuff's really interesting. I spoke at a couple higher ed conferences about similar stuff when I was still in higher ed and right after I left, trying to like push them to be a little bit more getting into these things and talking a lot about that like internal struggle of like slow versus fast. But it's really interesting to see how it's changing. I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore because it was super boring, but yeah.
You have a Super Bowl ring?
It was super boring.
Oh, super boring. I
don't have a Super Bowl ring yet. I was on one of the floats for the U.S. women's national team parade last summer, the ticker tape parade in New York.
That's really cool.
It's not a ring, but like I hung out with them, so that was cool.
Well, I hope you get a Super Bowl ring eventually.
Me too.
But no, the whole thing about colleges moving really slowly is kind of a thing we keep hearing.
Yeah.
And experiencing, so.
For sure. Cool. I got to run to a meeting. But
thank you so much.
Definitely feel free to follow up if you have any questions, and we should actually catch up sometime.
Great. Sounds good.
All right.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.